Hi everybody. So you'll see on Blackboard where I've put some PowerPoints and some more supplemental information for you. In particular, we're about getting almost halfway through the class, and so for those of you going on for teacher certification, I wanted to reiterate how the information that you're deriving from this course will be useful to you, not only in your future classroom, but in helping you with the principles of learning and teaching assessments you must take. And so please take a look at all of those. And I also wanted to just, because the last week or so, an awful lot of information about some of these educational psychologists and the real big players, I wanted to really just kind of go over them a little bit. I know you have the textbooks, PowerPoints to assist you with the reading and so forth, but I just wanted to add a little commentary, and I didn't want to do it before you read about them. I wanted to do it afterward, just so I could remind you of some of the really important contributions to education and how some of those contributions are still in place and how some have been challenged. And I'm going to start with Lev Vygotsky because I know the most about Lev Vygotsky. I did a fair amount of graduate work and coming to understand his sociocultural theory. And it's a theory that has informed what I do, and it's a theory that I've struggled with in online courses because we're not face to face, because I'm not doing what I would do in a face-to-face classroom. I really struggled with how to implement Vygotskyan theory, sociocultural theory, into my practice, and I don't think I'm there yet, but I'm working at it. So I'm going to go over what some of the aspects of this particular theory and why I think it's really important. So one of the most important books from Lev Vygotsky. By the way, Lev Vygotsky was Russian, and he died at a fairly young age, so it's only been recently that his texts have been translated. In fact, some of them are still being translated. He and Piaget were contemporaries, although they didn't know one another because they were in different countries. But their ideas came out at about the same time, even though we didn't know about Vygotsky's until later on. And so I'm doing some comparison here between Vygotsky and Piaget, because these two are very important in terms of cognitive theory. So from Mind and Society, Lev Vygotsky said, learning is a necessary and universal aspect of the process of developing culturally organized, specifically human psychological function. Okay, let me read that again. Learning is a necessary and universal aspect of the process of developing culturally organized, specifically human psychological function. In other words, social learning tends to come before development. Piaget believed that children's development must precede learning. So they really were at opposite ends here. It's flipped around. Vygotsky says the social part has to come before development or in conjunction with development. It's not that children develop and then they learn. Interesting points. So here's some other differences. Okay, so Vygotsky put more emphasis on culture affecting cognitive development. Piaget saw these development as universal stages and content of development. He saw it as a sort of lineal progression according to age, when a child was ready to learn something. Once they got to that developmental stage, and we still in schools today, we hear, and this is not untrue, but we hear developmentally ready, developmentally appropriate, okay? And it's not to say that's wrong, but that's not the only consideration. We know that with Piaget that he has these 4 stages, and we look at formal operations, 11 and up, and I think that many theorists and researchers today have really sort of discounted, or not discounted, but diluted some of Piaget's notions, okay? So, and then Vygotsky also puts more emphasis on social factors. So culture and social, that's sociocultural theory. So the social aspect of the world and the cultural aspect of the world has a lot of impact on cognitive development. And Piaget underestimated this. Vygotsky also felt that there was more and a different emphasis on the role of language in cognitive development. And again, Piaget underestimates that as well. I'm not showing you the Piaget PowerPoint, by the way. You do have that one. So I want to talk a little bit more about the social influences on cognitive development. Learning occurs, this is Vygotsky's theory, learning occurs with social interaction with a more knowledgeable other. So you can see why I struggle with sociocultural theory in an online course. And it's one of the reasons you get so many audios and videos from me, because I need, for me to feel effective, I need to have this interaction, even though it's a asynchronous interaction. And I'm coming to grips with that. Textual interaction is fine too, but I think there needs to be multiple modes of that. So MKO is the abbreviation for more knowledgeable others. So in Vygotsky's theories, a more knowledgeable other may model behaviors and or provide verbal instructions. This is cooperative or collaborative dialogue. Again, you can see where I struggle with this. I'm talking, but you're not listening to me in real time. You're hearing it another time. So we can't have the dialogic conversation in real time. It has to be delayed. And again, I'm coming to grips with this. The learner seeks to understand, then internalizes the information, using it to guide performance. This is very much kind of an apprenticeship model, where one tries on new knowledge, works to internalize it, and then moves forward and uses that to guide performance. So I see our discussion forums as a way of you internalizing the information that you read, and internalizing any commentary I may give you, and then using the information from me, your text, and your peers to move forward. The more knowledgeable other. Okay, who is this person? It's someone who has a better understanding or a higher ability level than the learner. Okay. Now this could be a teacher, it could be a parent or an older adult, but it could also be a peer. This is why the discussion forums are so important, because I may be a more knowledgeable other in a institutionalized stance, but I suggest that many of you are more knowledgeable others as well, and that we are teaching one another. Okay, that I am a student along with you. I am, rather than being the sage on the stage, I'd rather be the guide on the side. That's the role that I see for myself. I may know some things that you don't, and I may offer that information, but likewise, you know many things that you offer to me and your peers that help all of us to be learners. And interestingly, in our new electronic age, that more knowledgeable other could be electronic, which is... I'm not an electronic tutor, but there are computer programs that children can interact with, that do guide them, that do this guide on the side kind of role. So that's an interesting thing to keep in mind. All right. One important aspects. Sorry, I flipped the slide. I know I'm supposed to stop talking because it cuts me off. One of the most important concepts of Vygotsky's theory is the concept of the zone of proximal development. This concept relates to the difference between what a learner can achieve independently and what a learner can achieve with guidance and encouragement from MKO. So Piaget was very much a believer in discovery learning. Discovery learning is fine, and for some people that's fine, but you have to have a certain schema, a certain set of knowledge before you can engage in discovery learning. You could set me loose with an airplane and say, okay, learn to fly it, and I would probably not do very well. I would need some sense of what I'm doing. I need some schema, some background in order to even begin to think about how to fly this thing, okay? So, I mean, if I were going to go learn how to fly an airplane, I would need some guided assistance, a lot of guided assistance. I couldn't just read a textbook and get in and fool around with it and see what I could do. You know, maybe given 10, 20 years I might be able to do that, but not in realistic time frame. So, the zone of proximal development then is the place where a person learns. That's where a person has enough knowledge to take in this new knowledge, do something with it, and then move it into long-term memory and go on and use it for something else. Okay, model. Here's the model. The ZPD, zone of proximal development, and the ZAD, the zone of actual development. The zone of actual development is where a learner can achieve independently without a more knowledgeable other. Okay, so it's a place where you have achieved mastery or understanding, and you don't need a more knowledgeable other to do the work. So I can, let's see, what's a simple task that I know how to do? I can make quiche. We have chickens, and I've learned to make quiche. And I've always been able to make it, but I always had to look at a recipe, which I see as my more knowledgeable other. I don't need that anymore. I know it. I don't need anybody to show me how to do it. I can make it, and I can make all kinds of different quiche. I know the proportions. I know that, that I have to reduce the liquid when I use more liquid ingredients. I know I need to up the liquid when I use more solid ingredients. It comes out perfectly every time. It's my zone of actual development. Okay? A zone of proximal development is where I need some guidance or assistance. And here is a 4-step way of looking at it. First of all, I do, you watch. I do, then you help me. You do it and I help you, and then you do it and I watch. This is the gradual release of responsibility. Now, I'm not saying that this happens like 1, 2, 3, 4, because what happens is, I do, you watch, and you may ask a ton of questions. You may have to do this for a long time. My father taught me how to change the oil in my car when I was 16 years old. I hated it, but he made me learn to do it. Maybe learn how to change a tire too. I'm glad he did, but at the time, 16 years old, it's the last thing I want to do is oil all of my hands. But nonetheless, I watched him a lot, doing this a lot, and asked him tons of questions, probably more than he wanted to hear. And then he said, okay, it's your turn to do it. Okay, so he did it, and I helped him with it. Okay, I did certain things, and if I did something wrong, he corrected me. If I did it right, he told me I did it right, and so forth. And we did this for a while. And then it was, okay, I'm going to stand back, and you do it, and I'm going to watch. And so this is the place where lots of times we have to go back. So you do, and I watch. So I immediately spilled the oil, and he was like, okay, we need to go back. I need to show you how to do this so you don't spill the oil. So we had to go back to the step of I do, you help. Okay, and then we went back to you do, I help. And this went on back and forth, until I got it. And then when he was ready to cut the apron string, so to speak, it was like, okay, you do it and I watch. And this also may be a place where, where he says, wait, that's not correct, we need to go back. But ultimately, you need to get to that place where you have released, the responsibility is now on the learner. The learner can do it without assistance. And that is the zone of actual development. What happens in schools lots of times, and why kids get bored, is that we give them work to do that that is in their ZAD. They can do it. Why are we asking them to do it 14,000 times? We're not challenging them, or we're not assisting them to move beyond that. We're giving them work that they can do. Okay. So Vygotsky also put this really strong emphasis on language, okay? And he had terms for these: private speech and inner speech. So private speech is when people talk aloud to themselves, which is, I'm sort of doing that, I'm doing that now. But children do this a lot. If you watch children playing, they talk to themselves all the time. This is a means for them to plan activities and strategies, and it aids in their development. So language then is an accelerator to thinking and learn and understanding. And language develops from social interactions, okay? So kids working together, they talk to one another, they talk out loud, and then they develop language. Later in their development, language becomes internalized as thought and inner speech, which is what Vygotsky called it. And so then thought is the result of language. So we don't develop thinking skills or deep thought without first developing this language. So a couple of different concepts to play with. And then Vygotsky also believes strongly in the role of play. Imaginative play is crucial to development. When a child is at play, he or she is in constant dialogue with self or others. And this is true. Again, you watch children playing, and they talk. They don't play in silence. Children at play are making sense of the world through inner speech by talking out loud to themselves, and through private speech, talking out loud to themselves, and then through inner speech, internalizing these as thought processes. Discovering language via play is essential. And those are my references. Okay, so because Vygotsky is so important, I wanted to give him his own slideshow. And I gave Piaget his own slideshow too. I'm just not narrating that. But for all of us, this is the purpose of this class, but I'm going to reiterate that those of you who are going on to take the PLT, you got to be name droppers. You really want to know these people and what they said and how it's influenced schools. So, again, there are more, but these have been very influential in educational settings. John Dewey. The book doesn't give him a lot of tech space, but I wanted to bring him up because he really is important. Dewey was one of the first people to emphasize democracy and social justice in schools. He felt that schools were places where students learn more than content. This is a place where they learn how to live. This argument has gone on forever. What is the role of a teacher? Should a teacher just teach academics and disciplines, or is a teacher a role model teaching children what it is to be a citizen, a moral citizen? Do we believe that schools are places where students experience and interact with the curriculum and take part, so that they are active learners and not passive learners, and not just sitting in rows taking in stuff? They are interacting with the curriculum and taking part in their own learning. And he also believes schools were places where reform and social change could take place, because through education and through learning how to live, through learning different experiences, our students are educated so that they can undertake reform and social change that needs to happen. And he also believes schools were centers of communities, and that all membership participate. This is the spirit of public schools, and frankly, that's being eroded today with for-profit schools, some charter schools, not all, online schools, for-profit online schools. So the public school that is community-based, with a school board, members of the community, parents, children, being participants in this, that's being eroded today, I believe. Okay, so then we know Piaget. You can take a look at his PowerPoint and his stages of development. Vygotsky, again, important player, but you've got an entire PowerPoint of Vygotsky. And Erickson, you did a fair amount of work with. I'm just listing these again in terms of these developmental turning points. And on page 120 in your text there, you can see the chart which lines these up with other things, with their sort of age and what happens there. Kohlberg we didn't mention a whole lot, and I think he's important too, because Kohlberg really looked at moral reasoning and gave it 3 different stages. Pre-conventional does not understand social conventions and moral rules. These are children. They don't understand these things. They act impulsively, and they have to learn these conventions. So conventional is when children begin to understand and use principles to reason morally. In this stage, being good means doing what others approve of, according to social conventions. And I would argue that that continues into an adulthood for many, many people. They do good because that's what others expect of them. And they don't reach that post-conventional stage of understanding and embracing moral principles for the self, of knowing what is right is right because that person has determined it to be right. And again, post-conventional reasoning is very rare in school-age children, and even rare in adulthood. I would argue, and I think others would too, that few people reach that stage that really have that determination of what's right and wrong for them. They do it because society expects it of them. Then there's the behaviorists. You read about behavioral theory this week. Watson, John Watson, was the father of behaviorism. Conditioning the process of learning to react to the environment. And then we have Pavlov with classical conditioning. You've all heard the story of Pavlov's dogs. You read about them. You rang a bell. They salivated. Okay. Thorndike was the next in the behaviorists, came with the law of effect, which was that behaviors that have good effects tend to be more frequent. Behaviors that produce negative effects tend to be less frequent. We use behavioral theory when we raise our children. We use behavioral theory when we raise our dogs. We use behavioral theory in schools to produce acceptable behavior in our students. Skinner came after Thorndike with the theory of operant conditioning, which is based on Thorndike's law of effect, and he came up with the ideas of reinforcers for good consequences, punishers for bad. And then there were neutral, sorry I spelled that wrong, neutral operants that neither increase or decrease behaviors. This is, we sort of take this for granted, this idea that, and particularly in schools, we have this system of rewards and punishment. If you do something well, you get a sticker for it. If you don't do something well, you either don't get a sticker for it or you get a letter sent home. I think high schools particularly operate on this behaviorist platform. I think elementary schools, while they tend to use reward systems, they use them in a way that is supportive of all kids and not negative. Now, there are those that would argue that in life, there's rewards and consequences, and you have to take with things as they come. you know, I don't know. I think that's a little harsh, but nonetheless, the behaviorists have really influenced the way our school systems work. You know, think about if kids don't do their homework, what happens? If they don't pass in a paper, what happens? You know, if they don't bring a note, what happens? And so this takes us into the idea of consequences, and it's absolutely true. I mean, there are consequences for not adhering to social convention. And then that begs the question that who created this social convention? You know, the compliance. You know, and do kids comply out of obligation, or do they comply because they want to be part of the social fabric? They want to be part of that. They want to be good. And that takes us to the idea of developing conscience, of having this sense of internalization of values and empathy for others, and the ability to self-regulate without someone regulating you. In other words, not having this behaviorist platform make one perform in a way that one should. Okay, so that conscience becomes this place where we can then, you know, decide for ourselves what is right and wrong, and do right because we know it's the right thing to do. And then the other piece that we need to talk about is the ethic of care. You know, and so we have to remember that teachers really have to have this ethic of care, because the morality of care centers on the question, is someone in need? And we know that our students are in need, and we have to be sensitive to that need. Okay? Okay, so I think that's it. I just wanted to add a few things to what you've already read and what you've already discussed. And I haven't read your discussion forum yet for the behaviorist. I will do that Monday morning, because you do have until Sunday night to complete it. So I always hold off till Monday to make sure everybody's had a chance to get their 2 cents worth in. So if you have any questions, let me know. Have a great day.